Hi, this is lesson 6 of DSK Coding. In this lesson we're dealing with file I/O, input output, which is read and write, and storing of state. And that's the table of contents. So what is state? Well, state is what an object has. This means what you have in memory or what you have when you create the application. Say that you make a user, and this user has to have an ID and a username. So when they log in, they also have a password. And every time we close the application, this user disappears. He's not stored for or not retrieved the next time you start your program. We don't know, we can't remember what happened last time we ran the program. So state is the ability to remember what state the object was in, so what the memory values were, and then retrieving that. So there's three ways or main ways that we can store state, which is remote and local databases, serialization, and text file. We're going to only deal with text file today. We might deal with serialization in a later lesson. So you need to know what a stream is. And a stream is just a sequence of data. You have your input and your output. Read data from your source and writing to your destination, be that a file or a database or whatever you want. So we have different types: byte, character, standard, input, output, and error. Your standard input is system.in, so that's a text that you enter when you use scanner. Well, that's where it comes from. It's a standard string. Then we have a type as well that we're going to deal with today, which is called the file input stream and the file output stream. So we're going to also be using buffered reader and writer. What does buffered reader and writer do? Well, it's not that important that you know. This is just general knowledge. And what this does is that it starts reading the text to an output stream and buffers them so that it stays in memory, or caches all the stuff in memory before you even need it, just so that it's more efficient. And when you write, it's going to store it in sections and make sure that there is already a queue available for the hard drive to keep writing. That way it doesn't have to keep searching and stopping and starting, stopping and starting. It's a lot more efficient to write it. When you flush, it all gets onto the hard drive. So how do you write to a file? Well, the first thing you do is you have to create a buffered writer object, and then you have to use a try catch. Why do you have to use a try catch? Well, what happens if the hard drive crashes? What if you store it externally across the network and the network goes down? Then your program will crash, there'll be an exception, and the program crashes badly. And we want to do this nicely. We want to say, hey, there was a problem while saving your data. We don't want to lose all your data when that happens. We're just going to try again or something like that. So that's how we have our try catch. First, we're going to make a string file content, which is the stuff that we want to write down, that we want to save to the file. We have a file here that we create, new file, and all this is that it makes a file called test file. We're making it so that it's a text file. That's why we have .text. If the file doesn't exist yet, it's going to create the file. So that means if the file has never been created before, we don't have a test file.txt, well, then it will put it there. If we do not specify a path here, a directory path, it will make it in the root of our project. Then we create a file writer, which are called fw. Then we have to tell it what file it's writing, well, the one that we declared up here, the test file. Then the buffered writer has to take the file writer here, and then buffered writer writes the file content using the file writer. The file content is our hello world. Then at the end of this, we can just say file written successfully. We don't need to do that once we know it works. It's just as a test. Catch the exception in case something happens. That's the more specific exception, and that's the less specific exception. Then in our finally, so the finally always triggers no matter if we do try or catch. If either of these happen, the finally still triggers. It's just so that we can clean up what we've been doing, and we just close our buffered writer so that other programs can access our file. Because Windows or any Linux machine or anything like that, any operating system, when it opens the file, it reserves the file, it locks the file. That means that no other program is allowed to write or edit the file or anything like that while we're busy with it. And that's why we have to then close it, because we say that, okay, great, we're not using it anymore, everyone else can access it. And if that program runs successfully, then we have a new test file that we can open, and in that text file there should be hello world, which is our file content that we wrote over here. Now, reading a file is nearly exactly the same. The difference is that we use a buffered reader, a StringBuilder, instead of the file writer, over here. And we use a normal file again. So we say what file it's taking it from. This is the test file, so the one that we just previously wrote. We're going to use that one. We create a BR, buffered reader. We'll use a file reader instead of a file writer. Then we build a string builder, and all what the string builder does is that it takes every single line and makes it into one long string. What we could do is we could create an array and store all the strings each individually then, but we're not doing that right now. This time we're using a string builder. So string line is equal to BR read line. So each line is read individually, one after the other. At the end of the line, there's always that \n that we have to say that that's a new line. Well, it's going to use that to separate each line. And it knows that line ends when it gets to that token. So that's why we have our br.readLine. If it doesn't have a \n, it'll read all of it at one go and then end. So while the line is not null, so while it can still read a new line, it will take that line that it read and append it to our string builder. And then it will append a line separator. What that line separator is on Windows is our \n. On a Mac, it will be \n/c. It just has to do with the operating system itself. And then we're just going to read the next line. And if that next line doesn't exist, as in it just is blank, gets here, and then it's build successful text here, which is not part of the text file, that result will be null, and then this while loop will be false, and therefore it won't execute anymore, and we will get to the finally. Then when we get to the finally, we do the try and catch to see if the BR is still open. If the BR is still open, we close it so other programs can access it, and we just print out everything. And then we get hello world. Now this seems very complex. You do not have to memorize this. You probably will only use it once or twice in total in your entire program and then never use it again. So just look at the documentation for it, and every time you need to use it, you just kind of search it up and use it. None of us actually remember all of this off by heart. Alright, so let's build that slowly. First, this is the root of my program, which is lesson 6. You can quickly get to the root of your program by right-clicking on this, getting the copy file path, open your file explorer, select in here, paste it, remove the .java section of this, lesson6.java, which is the file name, and remove that over there, and hit enter. Then you'll be in where the file is. That'll be source code, lesson 6. And this is the root of your program. There is no file currently here. So let's create one, saying hello world, hello all my students, hello to all my students. So the first thing we're going to do is make a string which is our content, which is equal to hello students. And we're just going to have that. So that's what we're going to write to the thing, to the program, or to the file. Sorry. That's what we're going to write to the file. And then we're going to create our buffered writer, which is going to be equal to null just for now. Why do we make it equal to null? Just to make sure that it already exists, so that later on when we call it, it can still check if it's null or not, and then close it. And now finally. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our file, which is equal to new file, and this is my hello world file, hello student file. And let's call hello student file .text. We have to import that file, IO. If our file doesn't exist, so it doesn't exist yet, as you can see over here, there's no text file. Then we're going to create that file. So we're going to use file.create new file. Automatically creates a new empty file named by this abstract path name. If and only if a file with this name does not yet exist. So if that file doesn't exist yet, it'll create it for us. And at the end of this, we need to add that to our catch clause. Just Alt Enter. And then we have to start our file writer. FW, you can call that whatever you want. And we can write to that specific file that was just created. And we need to import that. There's a lot of imports in this case, as you can see. All IO imports. Buffered writer. We're going to start a new buffered writer. And that's all it does. Takes that file writer. And then we're going to just write to that file, which is going to be our content. and we can print out done. And then all we have to do in our finally is make sure that that file is closed. Sorry. Make sure that that file is closed. So we're going to do our if bw is not equal to null. Then we have to close it. And this, of course, has to be surrounded with a try and catch just to make sure that it doesn't break. Okay. Now, if we run this, it says done. So it was successful. We have a hello student file over here. And that's great. Hello students. So that text we want to change now. We want to make it something like hello students. And we'll just add to it. Made a new line by using that \n. How are you? If we run this again, done. And hello student file, hello students, how are you? Notice that this did not make a new line. Now why is that? You can use the \r and \n to run it. Done. Let's test this out now. How are you? Now this is only valid in Windows. What you can do instead is you can just add your system.line separator. And now this will be valid for Mac and for Linux as well. Hello students, how are you? So that's great. All right, and now we want to read from a file, read this text that we have back from our file. We're going to cut this text, we're going to cut it, and we're just going to put this into a method. Private static void print out file. No input, does all the stuff, and prints out the file. Or actually write to file. And then what we can do is we can do string file content. And instead of using this thing here, or we can make it content. And instead of using this here, we can just use the content directly. So we can write whatever we want to that hello student. So instead of string content, string file name. And instead of that, we can just add the file name. And now this will work for pretty much anything. All right, so let's call that method, write to file. We have our content, this is test content, and our file name will be tester.txt. Save it, let's run that. Oh, sorry, semicolon. Let's run that. Let's run. And here's tester, and this is test content. Congratulations, this is now dynamic. Okay, so we have this writing to file, now we want to read from a file. Now, the reading was nearly exactly the same as our writing over here. The first thing we do is we open our buffered reader, and we're just going to set that to null for now. And we're then going to start imports, Going to start our try, and we're just going to catch IO exception, IOE, and add our input for that. Well, we don't need to add our input yet because it's going to have an exception, E, and E dot print strike trace. And we'll have our finally clause. So this is currently complaining because we're not actually having an exception. So let's start. Let's do our test file.txt. Oh, sorry, what were we using previously? Hello student file, sorry. Hello student file. Hello student file.txt. And then we'll have a buffered reader, which we declared up here. Sorry. This is a new buffered reader, new file reader, and we can put in that file. All right, we need to import that as well. Now we have StringBuilder. So I have a string builder. What it does is create the strings for us when we read it. Before that, it's tokenized. And this is each individual line that we're reading, or the output of that. We're going to read our first line. Then, while our line is not null, which means that there's still text in the next line, we're just going to append that text, or append that line text to our string builder. And then we're going to just add our \r\n for now. This is the next line's text, just so you can see that it's there, what it does there, the appending. And then we're just going to read the next line. And at the end of this, we're going to have to close the file so that we stop messing with it. Sorry, if br does not equal null. And then we're just going to close the file reader. And of course, that's going to give an exception, so we have to surround this with a try and catch statement. And that's it. I'm assuming that we would like to actually print out that text that we just got. And this text is currently saved to, sorry, we have to actually still add the text string, all the text, all the file text, and then we're just going to take all that file text is equal to sb.toString. And just we're going to print out all the file text. And let's run that. The problem is that it might not have been initialized, so right up here has to just be equal to null. Hello students, this is the next line. It's text, how are you? And then we have this empty line, which is a little bit annoying. Which is due to the fact that we're just permanently appending that right at the end before we even get to the next line. Of course, we can make that cleaner, but don't really mind right now. Okay. Now, let's make that dynamic exactly the same as the other one. So make it into a function. That takes void read from file string file name. And instead of making this void, this will return the text that it got, which is a nice string, and then return all the text, all the file text. All right. So this is a test content, tester2. And then we're going to read that from the file. And of course, we have to print that out. So let's see what happens out of that. Hello students, how are you? We check over here, tester2. Hello. This is test content. What went wrong? Well, the file was still open. Sorry, this is the wrong text file. Hello students, how are you? Tester2. This is test content. Well, that's lovely. Why are we getting this? Well, the reason for that is that we're having this as test content over here. So that's actually correct. So this is not test content. So this is incorrect because it's reading the wrong file. It's reading the hello students file. So we have to change this to be the actual file name that it's given. This is not test content. All right, so that's it. Next section in a moment will be taking the user's username and then saving that to keep greeting the user saying hello and asking them if they want to change the name, and then updating the name if they want to change it. Okay, so let's make this a bit more useful. I'm just going to clear out these text files because I'm not using them anymore. Okay, so now we're going to make a new file, and this is going to be called user. and this user will have a username. And that's pretty much it. That's all we're going to do. And all this is going to take is public user, take the string of username, this dot username is equal to username. And we're just going to create, we're going to take this method over here, write to file, I'm going to copy that, we're going to put it in here, and instead of that we're going to say public static void write to file, and we're going to create another file which is another thing which is called public and save user. Public void save user. Alright, and what it's just going to do, it's going to write to file, the content which is the username, and we're going to give it this dot. Let's see what we can do. Get class. Returns the runtime class of this object. The return class object is the object that is locked by the static synchronized method. That sounds a bit annoying. So let's just use, let's just put in user. Again, we don't need to actually add text. That's just for Windows to realize that it's a text file. And we're not going to do that since the user's not supposed to use this. Void load user, which we're going to make the normal public user. This loads the user. And this is just going to call loads user. And this will be private public void load user. Private static oh sorry, it's load user, my bad. And we're going to take this read file thing. I'm going to put it in here as well. And we know that the file is always going to be called user, so read from file user. And it's going to get us, sorry, the string user. And it's going to get us the actual username. So this dot username is equal to read from file. Now, we also need to have a getter for our get username. So we're going to create one. Public string get user, and this dot username is equal to, oh sorry, return this dot username. And then we need to be able to set the user, public string, public void set user, this dot username is equal to username. And we of course need to add that as a parameter. All right. So we have all the stuff already. Let's remove all of this. All the stuff is now valid. Okay, so user is equal to a new user and Kyle. Except we don't want to do that. We want to actually make it so the user tells us what the user is called, right? Oh, sorry, apologies. This needs to be proper parentheses, not quotes, single quotes. Okay, so scanner input is equal to, sorry, today is not my day. New scanner system.in and import that. Please enter username. Just for the first time. And we'll do it input.next. All right. Get user. I think we should change that from get user to get user name. And set user name. And let's print that out. Hi, person's name. And we're just going to say, we'll stop there, close that, run it. Please enter your username, and please enter your username, Kyle. Hi, Kyle. Now, we don't want to always create a new user. We only want to do that if the person actually has to enter a username. So what we're going to do, we're going to duplicate this downwards, is that we're not going to run this because the user already exists. And remember, if the user already exists over here, it will use load user. Let's see if this actually works. It might have a problem, but yeah. Yeah, the problem is null. We look over here. What did we do wrong? Well, we forgot to save it to a text file. So here, when we do that, we have to do user.saveUser. Run that. F6. Kyle. Hi, Kyle. We close these. We remove these two. And now we're loading user from the text file. F6. Hi, Kyle. Now this full stop, I'm going to debug and find what's wrong with that one in a moment. And I'm just going to put on this one for now. So the reason that is happening is because of the fact that we're always appending a line separator. So what we can do as a good idea, or just for that we can keep in here, is that we're just going to take a boolean of checking is first time, which is equal to true. And as long as that is true, boolean, then we only append that new line if it is not the first time. Control Shift, there we go. Else, we'll just do that one time. We'll just append that line that one time. Else. So first new line, then add line. Otherwise, we'll just that's equal to false, and we're going to append the next line to the bottom here. Is first time. And then we can read the next line. So let's see how that looks like. Hi, Kyle. Awesome. So that's fixed, and we now have our users here. Now, what would be interesting would be to make it so that we don't have to comment this out. So if there's no new user, or if a new user doesn't exist, then we create a new user and prompt the user for the name and everything like that. So remember this file, if file doesn't exist, create new file? Well, why don't we do it in there? So what we can do is that if the file doesn't exist, then we call this function of creating a user, which is this one here, write to file. So let's see what actually happens currently if that file does not exist. So we have that user file over here. Let's run that. Currently this is trying to load it, and we're getting null. So if user is null, or the text file, this dot load user. If username, this dot username is equal to null, equal to, then we have to do the create user. So let's do that. Public void create user. And what this is going to do is we're going to say, please enter a username. And then we're going to take the person's user input. So we're going to need to use a scanner class inside here, use scanner, system.in. And this dot username is equal to input.next. Let's import that. So this dot username is input.next, and then we have our user that we've created. And then make sure to just save the user, which is this dot save user. and we can right-click run. So now if we don't have this file, which we have over here, let's just refresh to make sure. It's going to say, please enter username, Kyle, enter, hi Kyle. We run this, if we check over here, there's user, we run it, hi Kyle. Right, so what I'd like you to add is that after this, you just create a short menu that has the options of, firstly, you're going to quit, 1 quit, 2 edit user. And all this does is allow you to enter a new username. Right. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. It was moderately short compared to the other ones again. And now you can maintain the state. So what you can also do is you can use your toString in order to save it or something like that. These write to files, just save them somewhere that you can just keep copy pasting them because it's not worth it learning them off by heart. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Bye.